Okay, let's see. Y'all can hear me properly. Microphone. There we go. Okay, okay. All right. Hey, hope y'all are doing good. Apologies for the initial issues there. I was trying to get StreamYard set up, but I couldn't find the right credentials, so it was a little bit tricky. But happy Friday, May 31st. Happy to be here with everybody. I've got my iced Americano today. Usually I go by the name Brian just because it's easier. Especially, I've had a hard time pronouncing my name in Spanish. So I know it's Ryan, but then often it's Wyatt or a bunch of other things. So Ryan is like that, or I can just say Brian, which sounds a little bit easier for me to pronounce. So, but hey everybody, happy Friday. Good to see you, Amir, Lucas, Kumar, Vincenzo, Tyler, Benoit. Hey, hey, hey. Awesome. Well, yeah, so I mean, it's been an interesting week so far. I've got a kind of a list of things that have happened this past week. Let me see if I can pull that up here. Okay. All right, all right, all right. So yes, there was some AWS announcements that came out that I've got here. Shout out to Jonathan from our team for helping put together a small little mini list here to kick things off. So I don't know how many of them are directly relevant to big changes, but there definitely was a S3 reduced redundancy storage. So that's interesting to you. Not so much to me, but it's like one of the small ones there. EventBridge now supports managed keys for event buses. So eventually, you used to have to use the native service. So now you can actually bring your own keys to it. So that could be relevant to you. Knowledge bases for Amazon Bedrock now lets you configure interface parameters and guardrails. So, for instance, if you're using Amazon Bedrock and you're looking for a little bit more compliance, and you're trying to work inside of that, there's now something called guardrails. So let me actually pull that up, and maybe we can talk about it. Okay, here it is. So let me stream this. Share screen. Here we are. Yeah, so kind of interesting here. So, for instance, if you're using Amazon Bedrock and you're connecting it to an internal company data sources for retrieval of augmented generation, then they've now introduced guardrails and it's integrated directly into knowledge bases, which is then connected to your internal knowledge set, your company data source. And now you can set up safeguards. So this is apparently leading to a better user experience. Let's see why that is. Provides a comprehensive set of policies to protect your users from undesirable responses and interactions. So that's cool. Also, on this topic of generative AI, I know we talked about this last time, either on the internal coffee with Ryan or the external one. Um, I don't know. I've been less impressed with. I think initially when I'll stop sharing this one. Initially, when ChatGPT came out, I felt like I wrote an article about using ChatGPT 3 and 3.5. I updated that article and I asked it to write some infrastructure as code for serverless framework and put that together. And then the result that I got back was pretty terrible. But then as I kept modifying the prompt and making it more robust and adding in all these extra details and this is how you should split the stack out and this is what you should include and it should have reuse of these parameters and use this naming convention, eventually I got to a result that was pretty good. And so I think from that initial feeling, which was last year, I thought, okay, maybe we are on the pathway to software developers being replaced. And I think that's as someone put, I believe it was Fawn from Serverless Group put, sort of the hype cycle that we're in, where the initial hype is getting drummed up and everybody's like, oh my gosh, and we have that generative AI software developer tool that comes out, and oh my gosh, Devin AI is writing its own software. What does this mean? And then immediately start going through the thoughts of, okay, if this can open up an IDE and have three different screens and test its code and rewrite its code and fix these errors, wow, what does that mean for the future? And then you see that actually it's only handling a very small subset of things. And so what does that mean? So why does that not mean that the end of software dev days are nearby? It's simply because it's so hard to actually get a hyper specific result that is accurate. So, for instance, you may be trying to brainstorm, you may be trying to write notes, transcription's really good. I mean, obviously, generative AI is good for tons and tons of things. However, if you were going to, let's say, build a bridge, like a physical bridge, and you needed all of the math and all the tension points and everything to be like 100% accurate, otherwise people will die. Yeah, then you can't use these systems for that. And that specific scenario could help with brainstorming what a bridge could look like. But what I was running into the other day when I was asking questions to the GPT 4.0 or 4.0 is it started being a little too creative with what the results were. And I was asking it about something very simple. Almir ended up beating ChatGPT again. So shout out to Almir. Once again, you bested the generative AI. But what I was trying to do is do a cross account role switch into an AWS account, which is pretty standard. We do it all the time. However, I haven't had my hands in it for a little bit, so I couldn't remember what the default role name was when you actually set up these cross account role switches. And so then I went to GPT and I was like, hey, okay, before I start bugging the team about it, let me go ask ChatGPT. They got the new model out, and the responses that I got back were basically that there was no default name and there was no that didn't exist what I was asking it for. And it started basically giving me random role names and stuff to try, and they were like, the whole thing just didn't make sense. And I was just like, wow, okay, this is a problem, not because it gave the wrong result, but because it was telling me that the result that I was asking for didn't exist. That's where it gets really tricky, right? So what you have with the generated AI models is you have this like general AI. So it's trained on tons of data, but then the ability to sort of weight that across all of it is really tricky. Paul shared a video, I think in our either our internal copy with Ryan or the one before that was external. And I went and watched those videos about how the AI industry is trying to solve these problems. And it kind of comes back to this thing. A long time ago, I worked on a machine learning project where we were doing computer inference, and the computer inference that we were doing was related to getting like the exact product that we wanted based on taking a photo, let's say. And the problem with it is that the more data that you introduce into this model, the more that it had to sort of weight across the entire data set. And so the more products that you add in, the less confidence score you can get on any one specific product. And so then I was like, okay, so obviously there's tons of different ways to do that now, and I'm not up to date on all the different methods that exist. However, when the generative AI stuff came out, I started questioning like, okay, maybe this is not a problem anymore, and this has sort of been solved. But then watching that video that Paul shared, it sort of re-brought up the fact that you can have these general models, but the ability for a general model to solve a hyper-specific problem is just almost impossible, actually. What you need for that is a specific, narrowly trained model for just that specific thing. And that's where it still comes back to the thing that was, years and years ago that's still relevant. Where if you're trying to solve a problem where you need to specifically pick out a product out of tons of different products, you're not going to be able to then have that general AI model also help you with legal advice and everything else, right? So yeah, it's kind of interesting. I know that there's ways for it can read the query, it can interpret it, it can route it to a different model, and so on and so on. But it's a problem that's like appearing to come up now with the GPT side a little bit in a way that I feel uncomfortable about, and that's the reason why I was saying I don't think the end is near, because you can't have a system that you're working with tell you that something doesn't exist just because it doesn't know about it, right? It would be the equivalent of having like a junior developer then telling like a senior or staff or principal developer that this doesn't exist when you actually know that it does exist, And it's sort of like I guess if it was humans, we would probably say that that was ego or something, right? So the ego of GPT 4.0 is that it should know all of the information, or 4.0, but the reality is it doesn't. And so then in those specific situations, which they can obviously keep updating, which they will. But in those specific situations, what I would prefer as a customer, as a user of GPT, or any of these generative AI models, would be for it to just tell me straight up, hey, this is a confidence score on what you asked. I don't have the information to properly handle this, and not sort of be the sort of con game, right? Where it's sort of saying, what you're asking for doesn't really exist or whatever. And it's like, no, it does exist, you know? So, anyways, that's a little side rant there. Hey, Mario. Hey, Fawn. Hello from Dwala. If you didn't know this about serverless Guru, we're spread all around the globe. So it's pretty awesome. I wonder if our serverlessguru.com about page, we were going to put a map together that had more of this information. Let's see if we still have it. Okay, we don't have the map, but we should bring the map back. Maybe it was an internal thing. I won't share our internal map out publicly, obviously, but it's kind of fun when we work with a global team. It's like there's things happening all around the world, um, not just bad things, obviously, but good things too. And you learn a lot about different cultures and recipes and all sorts of like pop culture references, and it's just like new stuff, things I've never eaten, songs I've never heard, events that I've never, even thought about before. It's pretty awesome. All right, let's keep going down this list here. So, guardrails for Amazon Bedrock. So, if you're concerned about connecting your company internal database to Bedrock to then be able to run these sort of queries against, then yeah, maybe this gives you a little bit more confidence there. Elastic announced Elasticsearch serverless to accelerate building AI search apps. Okay, let's see what that's about. Okay, so this one's actually outside of the AWS sphere. Oh, you know what? Let's talk about what Lucas just said because it's relevant to the thing we just said. So from Lucas here, hey Lucas, some people claim that we're getting to a plateau in AI advancements, like a child learning a new skill. At the beginning, advancements is steep, but then it becomes continuous and small improvements. That's actually a really good point. They say it's very easy with any skill set to get to an amateur or like an average level. But then becoming past that average level can take, the 10,000 hours, right? I mean, I was thinking about this the other day because so for instance, I do a lot of skateboarding, and when you think about the mechanics of skateboarding, or you think about the mechanics of throwing a dart, or even picking up something off of a table, or something drops, and like instinctively, everything that you've learned in your entire life allows you to reach your hand out and grab that specific thing with the tips of your fingers. All of that, it's like, how does our internal system work? Is it a bunch of models? I've got some finger models, I've got a hand model, I've got an arm model, a forearm model, and then somehow my brain is routing that to the proper one to be able to handle that specific scenario in like realer than real time. But also, how does that get trained? Well, it gets trained over my entire life of each one of these interactions happening. And so, yeah, I think that's a really good analogy there. Let me pull up the image that shows the learning curve from average to like master to advanced. Definitely not a straight line. It's like it plateaus really hard, and you have to work even harder to get past that. Let me see, learning curve plateau maybe. There we go. Okay, this one seems good enough. Let me open up this image and screen share it. Okay, so all right. So at the very bottom, on the left side, we've got skill, we've got experience and practice, and we have novice. Looks so hard I can't do it. And you have learning basics. Wow, I'm really doing it. Excitement. I'm learning so much, and everyone gives me compliments on it. And then the long plateau. I can do it now, but my work isn't great, and I'm stuck in a rut. Also, during this long plateau, you start learning about the idea of how much effort actually goes in to hit those next levels. And you just have to sort of consistently keep showing up and keep trying to move the ball forward little by little. Speaking to the human side of how I think it works, you have to just keep trying to consistently show up and keep moving it forward. Keep in mind that it's a marathon, not a sprint, as they always say. I didn't like that when I was growing up, growing up when I was in my early 20s and starting serverless guru. I would get this sort of message about that of like, oh, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Don't over push it, on and on and on. But reality is like sometimes you do have to burn yourself out. That's part of it, right? Um, because it depends on what you want. It depends on what you're willing to sacrifice for. It depends, and only you can make the decision for that. And it's different for everybody, and it's not only about work. It could be about family. It could be about being, a good father, a good husband. It could be about a hobby that you have. It could be about gardening. It could be about anything. But yeah, you have to ask yourself that question. It's like what's possible based on what you can see out in the world, right? There's masters of everything. There's masters of gardening, right? That can build an entire forest with fruit trees and all this stuff, right? But you might struggle initially with just being able to get your first seedling, and then after your first seedling, then being able to transfer that and actually have it grow and keep it alive with pests or too much sun or too much rain or too much water and the wrong pH balance if you're doing hydroponics or something, whatever that ends up being. And each one of those different phases requires continuous learning and growth and consistency. And you may have to sacrifice going on that trip because now your plants might die, or you might have to sacrifice going on that trip because you've got a family to look after, or you might have to work extra hours because the goal that you're trying to hit, if it's not done by Monday, then that breaks everything. And so obviously, then you have to put in those extra hours. So it's a hard thing, but it's like the sacrifice, knowing the trade offs, knowing what you really want, being self aware of who you are, and then continue to push. How does that relate back to AI? I don't know. I was ranting a little bit. But the long plateau is basically this period where now you can actually do things. So back to skateboarding, you can do an ollie. You can, if you're not familiar with what an ollie is, you can jump over a curb. Maybe you can jump over a couple skateboards. But then you see the professionals and they're ollieing and they're grinding down a rail downstairs or something, right? And then you get to the point where you can do like a little grind on a box, but then the idea of rolling up on a stair set that drops down, 6+ feet, and it's very long. And if you don't hit the rail correctly, you could then fall and just like hit your face straight on the concrete, going like 10 miles per hour. It's you can wear a helmet, you can put on pads, but the reality is, without the consistency over a really long period of time, you can't just jump that growth forward. Otherwise, you're gonna like kill yourself probably, right? Like if somebody that was at an intermediate level try to do something that's extremely advanced and something like skateboarding, let's say, but this would be the same case with any extreme sport. Um, yeah, your chance of actual severe injury and or death is like really high. Another example is I did some spear fishing a while back, and I would see the YouTube videos where all these professional spear fishers, they just like go to the beach, they swim out into the ocean, they've got their spear gun, all their equipment, and then they swim down down like 10, 15 feet under the water, or I guess I would translate to I don't know, 3 meters or something under the water. And then they would search around, they would stay under the water for like 30 seconds to a minute until eventually they found the right fish. And then they would go and try to shoot the fish, bring it back. Um, but then there's other areas that you have to think of, right? The first one that comes to your mind when you think about spearfishing and think about being in the ocean, open water swimming, one, are there sharks? Are there predators? But then it becomes you don't end up seeing sharks very often at all, at least where I'm at in the Caribbean. And so then the next thing that I was not even thinking about was exhaustion. But then not even exhaustion, because obviously you can think of exhaustion, but what about currents, right? And so I'm fortunate that the time that I went out and sort of did the advanced spearfishing, open ocean swimming, um, the current was strong, but luckily it was sort of pushing towards the beach. If that current or that wind had been offshore and I had been tired, um, I don't know, man. I didn't have a plan for that. So that's where this long plateau, it's like you should embrace where you're at and you should move it a little bit forward, but in inches, every single day, little by little. And then as you get to that more advanced area, you're now prepared and able to handle it. And then you don't end up, getting in the wrong current, offshore winds, um, and on and on and on. How does that relate back to AI? Well, I think that these AI systems they have to evolve and keep evolving. Obviously, they do it faster than we do. They can read a million articles, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but there's a lot of stuff that we don't understand about our own brain and the way that nature works and all this stuff. And we're operating over all these layers of abstraction, right? I there's a movie actually. This movie I like don't want to recommend it because I think the movie was like kind of weird. It's called The Sasquatch. If you have like an art theater around you or something, maybe you can find this movie. Um, let me pull up a photo of this thing. Okay, okay, here we go. So it's called Sasquatch Sunset. Let me open it up and then share that. So this movie is really interesting because it's super small, but there you can see it. Um, they can't speak. I don't want to spoil it. So spoiler alert. If like I'm just gonna spoil like a very small amount of the movie. Um, they don't talk in the entire movie. All they do is grunt. And I think like the biggest thing that I got out of this, you might wonder like how long can you sit watching a movie where there's no sound and they don't communicate other than grunting? And about about 20 minutes in, I looked over and I was just like, should we leave? Like this kind of sucks, right? But the reality of this movie is that you walk away with this deeper understanding of the, how humans have evolved into what we are right now. I mean, if you really think about what we're doing at the moment, I'm speaking English. I'm using a piece of machinery that's using a invisible signal to my router that's then sending off to satellites or underwater cables across the ocean that's then being received in multiple different countries in real time, and you guys are understanding what I'm saying, each word that I'm saying. We're talking about concepts that I'm not an AI engineer to the level of being able to specifically understand and tweak a really complex like machine learning model. And I would argue probably none of us here are to that level of understanding how each individual layer and how the light signals are happening and being received at each one of those like seven layers that and ends up leading to our mobile phone or our laptop being used with those networking paradigm. And so it's like this interesting thing where it's like all of us have a baseline understanding of sort of what's happening, but then to get very deep into it, that's where it gets tricky. And yeah, so what does this movie kind of relate to that? Well, when inside the movie, they don't have language. They have no written language, at least. They have no, I would argue they have no verbal language either, but they definitely don't have any written language. And so when one of them dies, all of the knowledge dies with that person, with that Sasquatch. And so if you think about this, all of the years leading up to maybe 6,000, 12,000, whatever you want to say, like I think the oldest language that was sort of written down, I guess, was the Babylonian language, and that was like 5,000, 6,000 years ago. So let's just say whatever that ends up being 5,000, 6,000, 10,000, 50,000 years, the first written language that we have, that was the first time that generationally, after someone died, we were able to really carry forward that knowledge and those concepts and then build those additional abstraction layers. And the acceleration of that has just continued to keep increasing with written languages being translated and other languages creating a written version of their verbal language, their oral language, to then libraries, to then internet, to then everything else that we have now with GPTs just knowing all the information of the world and then being able to translate it into all these nuanced ways. across different regions and countries. So I thought that was interesting because like I wanted to bring this up because there's an idea around that, which is if we didn't have those base layers, we would all go back to grunting, actually, which is kind of nuts to think about. And you could probably do an experiment with that. What knowledge do we have as humans that's intrinsic to us that would come out naturally if you, for instance, took this is going to sound really messed up. If you took a human baby and you locked them inside of a room, they wouldn't be able to come up with the English language or underwater sea cables or internet or Wi-Fi. No, no, no. That would take hundreds, thousands of years to be able to do. And the only reason that we can do what we do now is because of hundreds, thousands of years of continuous effort from other humans, and then being able to read their experience, understand it, be taught that inside of our schools, and then gradually level our own knowledge up from there. And I think it's a interesting movie because it really makes you step away from everything that we sort of operate inside of in our day to day life, and then look at that sort of how long would it take for us to go back to the idea of like cavemen or Sasquatch, and really it can happen in one generation. That's how fragile all of this is. So you know, yeah, which is to say I'm extremely grateful that you know we are here and mathematics exists and physics exists and we have internet and we have communication across countries and cultures and all this stuff, and definitely don't take it for granted, and also the AI systems, there's going to be a whole other evolution thing that happens there, which let's see. So I think it'll happen faster, but who knows. All right, back to Lucas. Instead of reinventing the way you do things, it's just improving, and yeah, 100%. The key is not quitting. You know, don't quit, don't stop. Just keep pushing it forward. You might slow down a little bit, which is okay. Sometimes you have to, as they say, you have to slow down to speed up, right? You have to go a little bit slower to then go faster, and that's totally fine. If I had to relate that back to the consulting space and helping companies with, let's say AWS adoption, sometimes the easiest solution that's easy for people to understand and so on is maybe like that lift and shift sort of mentality. Let's take what we have today and then let's just move it over here. And once we move it, we get 15% increased performance, and we get 20% increased cost savings. And then my argument would be, well, why 15%? Why 20%? Why not 95%? Right? Why not like it's like why don't we step out of it completely and look at it with completely fresh set of eyes and ask ourselves the question, what is actually a requirement and a necessity for doing what we're doing, right? And to relate that to even a more simple example would be, let's say, sending emails, right? Let's say that you've got to send out 1,000 emails, right? And you've got this copy pasted message and you have to send it out to everybody. And then you get sat down and someone tells you, okay, your job is to send this copy pasted message to 1,000 people, right? Well, then we might go, okay, let's just do it informally. But then it might be like, okay, well, let's try to reduce that time, how long each email takes. So let's track that. Let's get a metric behind it. Okay, so for each email to copy it, to paste it, and send it, it takes 30 seconds, right, or a minute, right? Let's say, but probably even faster than 30 seconds, hopefully. But then, of course, we're humans. We have to take breaks on and on and on. So, how many can we do per day? How many can we do per minute, per hour, etc.? And then, if you're thinking inside of that box, you go, okay, how do I make that faster when we copy paste the message, right? But if you're thinking outside of that box, and you might go, okay, what type of automation exists where we can leverage that to then send 1,000 emails in 1 minute with the same templated message with dynamic variables introduced, and we end up taking this entire what could be 1,000 emails times a minute times I don't know, 1,000 minutes divided by 60. I don't know what that ends up being. Hours and hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, something like this. And so now that's 3-4 hours of time. Hopefully my math isn't terrible. Let me check. Let's see, 1,000 divided by 60. Oh, 16 hours. That was way off. So now you're 16 hours of time for sending that copy pasted message at 1 minute, each time. And we think about that. Okay, is somebody that's like helping on this, are they actually working a full 8 hour day, only doing that and not ever taking a break, distracted? No, probably not. So a solid 16 hours of like hands on keyboard, copy pasting messages, that might be actually like 3 or 4 days of time. Let's just say it's 4 days of time. So you reduce that 4 days of time into like 1 minute, and then in the box thinking, you go, okay, well, what is the cost of the platform that we're going to use to then send out these emails? And they go, okay, well, $50 a month. Well, that sounds way too much, right? But then you think about how much does it cost to then pay somebody for 4 days of time to then get this 16 hours of like real hands-on keyboard work, and you do the math, like even at a really low level for like an assistant or something inside the U.S., let's say it could be like $20 an hour. $20 an hour times 4 days of work times 8, 32, 32 times 20. What is that number? 32 times 20. We come out to 640 US dollars. And that platform that costs $50 or $100 a month, you immediately see the benefit of that almost instantly. But if you're thinking inside of that box, you look at it and go, oh, well, that's an increased cost of $100. And so, all of us understand this. We're all inside of the same space. But that's the sort of things that we have to battle against, is that traditional thinking where you're thinking inside of the box and you're only looking at what exists today, and the out of the box thinking. And then the hard part is taking that out of the box thinking and now that potential solution or alternative pathway, and then presenting that to the executives of the company that's already operating in this traditional way to get them to see it as well. And it's a same as that learning curve photo that we looked at a second ago. It takes time to know how to communicate that properly. And yeah, we got Deep in here. Good to see you. Hello from Canada. Awesome. Yeah, if any if anybody has comments on all the ranting happening, definitely feel free to drop your side in there. All right. We talked about Elasticsearch having something. Let me screen share that one. Okay. Elasticsearch accelerates building AI search apps on serverless. Now, I would argue that this is not AWS, right? So, I think some of the controversy around the fact that AWS has their own Elasticsearch is someone definitely jump in if I get this wrong, but I'm going to speak to my understanding, which I'm starting to question as I say it. Um, Elastic is an open source um, project that then AWS saw an opportunity to then build a similar service, and then they just ended up calling it the same thing. Is that accurate? Is someone's in the comments? Can you tell me? Is that the accurate story of how there's an Elasticsearch inside of AWS, and where some of the controversy comes from when we think about AWS and how they're, let's see. I guess their opinion would probably be that oh, they just changed it to OpenSearch, right? I see. Just looking at this article. Okay, back to it. Up. Okay. All right, let's keep reading. So Elasticsearch, AI apps, optimized for vectors and generative AI development. Like we got a developer console here. We can put in the HTTP method, and then we can put in the pathway for the API. And then between line 2 and 11, we can put in our JSON request, which is weird to me because it's a JSON request with the GET method. I'm not sure how that works. Search AI lake and architectural changes, select your client, pay for what you consume. Yeah, I'm not sure. So if you're interested, if you're already using Elasticsearch and you understand the line that I'm talking about between what is Elasticsearch versus OpenSearch and the history there, and you're looking to try out something new, then it's the new update from them as of May 15th. So as of about 15 days ago. All right, keeping it going. Vercel completed a $250 million Series E round at 3.25 billion valuation. All right, let's screen share that. There we go. We got Jonathan here. According to Elasticsearch, OpenSearch is not Elasticsearch. It is a common misconception that both Elasticsearch and OpenSearch are similar search engines. So, yeah, there you go. All right, and then to this article from Reuters. I think we all are familiar with Vercel. Vercel helps you host front ends and makes that process a little bit simpler, more simple. So it says here, Vercel, a software startup that provides a platform for building cloud-based cloud. What did I say? No, cloud. I had to say cloud-based cloud applications. Platform for building cloud-based web applications has raised $250 million in its Series E that values the company at 3.25 billion. So how cool is that, right? I think we're all familiar with Vercel. Obviously, they've been involved in the space for a long time, and I know clients. Oh, it's showing. So coffee with Ryan. We got a Wolf Gourmet tin cup coffee maker here. Transparency. I was looking at coffee makers, and the algorithm is tracking. I am being tracked to the T at the moment. Vercel said it recently exceeded 100 million in annual revenue, and then every month more than 1 million software developers use its Next.js technology, an open source framework for building web applications. They really want me to buy a coffee maker. Look at that. You even get prices in the advertisement. I can buy it right now. Jeez. A $600 coffee maker, that could be a topic in itself. What makes the Wolf Gourmet tin cup coffee maker so good? Is it the red knobs? I feel like with this coffee maker, with any of these Wolf appliances, I don't know if you guys have heard of Wolf appliances. I didn't really know anything about it previously. I still really don't. But I've noticed that all of their stuff, their ovens, their toasters, they have this red component to it. It really makes me feel like if you've seen the shoes, the high heels that have the red bottom on it. I don't know if that's like, I can't remember, is that Louis Vuitton or is that like Gucci or something? But I feel like Wolf appliances sort of apply that same red stylistic thing versus just being pure silver and black. And that's sort of what allowed them to probably charge what they charge as well. I don't know if anybody has an opinion on on the Wolf coffee maker. Feel free. Anyways, so Vercel has raised $250 million. Awesome to them. I'm sure the team is super excited over there. And obviously, they're continuing to help push people into serverless and into cloud. And obviously, that has a good effect for all of us that are in this space. Google announced that Project IDX, the company's next-gen AI-centric browser-based development environment, is now open beta. So fast forward September 15th of 2024, Google has now shut down Project IDX. Let me open it up. So it's now an open beta, and within 6 months, it will be deprecated. No, just make it fun. Okay, so let's see. Project IDX, the company's next-gen AI-centric browser-based development environment, is now open beta. Invite only and gated by a waitlist in August, as over 100,000 developers already tried the service. It's a multi-platform development experience that makes building applications fast and easy. Makes it frictionless. That's what I love about some of the marketing language that you see online, is that you read it and then you reread it and you realize they're actually not saying anything. What does fast and easy mean? And what does frictionless mean? I love it. I use the words too, but yeah. So you can use templates like Next.js, Astro, Flutter, on and on and on. And I guess if I had to fill in the gap for them, once you use that template, then it's going to help you put together an entire project, likely using generative AI already built in. And it says that it will enable deploying apps to Cloud Run. And Cloud Run, I feel like, is a service from GCP, from Google Cloud, that makes it really easy to just like throw something together, run it. I believe it supports Docker as well. So it says here, it's a serverless platform for running front-end and back-end services, and it'll scale out for you. It'll do a lot of that hard work for you. Yeah, I've heard a lot of good stuff about Cloud Run over many years, and they've continued to keep putting effort and energy into it. Fun fact, almost immediately after the AWS journey started for me, I went to GCP And this was very early days of serverless. Not like it wasn't like 2015, but it was like 2018 or something. So API Gateway had come out like recently, or AppSync had come out recently. API Gateway like a couple years before, like 2 years before, and then I immediately got hired to sort of help on the Google Cloud side. So I went and got the senior architect, their architect professional certification, and another one. And sort of a fun, interesting story in the background of all of this. Um, that GCP backpack that they gave me, um, the GCP backpack that they gave me for completing the certification, I kept it and I wore it, and I even took it to reInvent. I took it to AWS reInvent like twice, I think, like 2 years in a row. I had it. I felt like I took the GCP certification. I studied for it, had to do all that, of course, had to understand the services. I got the certification. At this time, I think I already had like 4 AWS certifications or something. So it was like, the only reason I say that is because I never got a really nice backpack from AWS. But then I did one certification on GCP and they gave me like a 10 buck two backpack that was like super nice. And it was gray and black, and it was sort of like this like slated style. It was super cool. It was a fold over backpack, and so I got some crap from people for for carrying the GCP backpack years into the future. But I told AWS at one point, whatever the AWS representative that we had, was basically like, yes, I would happily wear an AWS backpack, but it has to be better or at least the same quality as this GCP backpack. And they've never been able to hit it. So but Serverless Guru is making backpacks, and it's gonna blow GCP out of the water. Um, as we normally do. Here's the jacket here. Um, this is a nice zip up jacket from I think Marine Layer. Marine Layer. The only reason I know about this company, there was a moment that happened actually in another story. I was in the AWS Community Builder program when it first launched, and I think this maybe the second renewal period or within that first period, they were announcing serverless heroes, and then I got flagged down as being an AWS hero, and then they were like, I got congratulation messages, and I was like, I wasn't paying attention to Slack at the time, and I got congratulation messages like, oh, congrats, Ryan, I'm becoming a hero. I was like, I'm a hero. And then I looked at the thing and it said my name or whatever. And then I got a message from the organizers of the community builder program. They're like, oh no, that was a mistake. And I was like, all right, whatever. So then they sent me a community builders zip up, and that's the same brand as what our serverless guru ones were. So moral of the story, I didn't get the hero, but I did figure out a good zip up jacket, and then we sent that out to everybody at serverless guru, following all that, and so hey, here we go. So from Fawn here, AWS user group leaders and community builders backpacks are not that good, but those for AWS heroes is way better. So that's the carrot, man. You got to keep chasing the carrot to eventually get it. We were looking at something really interesting. We're having to work with the manufacturer right now to figure this out. So relevant for obviously all the serverless guru people here, but if you're looking for a job, if you're ever in if you're ever looking for a job and you're talking about AWS serverless based workloads and helping on that, build both the code, architecture, et cetera, on and on and on. We have backpacks potentially in the future if that's the thing that moves the needle to working with serverless. So the backpacks, though, we're looking at a wax backpack. So I can't give too many details, because we haven't been able to get the manufacturer to print the sample yet. We have our operations team looking at it, but it's a wax backpack that then would have the serverless guru logo on it, and it makes me feel like Indiana Jones, when I'm thinking about serverless guru, what does that mean? Serverless guru, it's your guide on the journey to cloud excellence, right? Your guide, right? And so we switched up some of the marketing design as well to show the serverless guru logo with a staff walking down a pathway leading you to cloud excellence. And now, what better of a backpack than a wax backpack? in like a tan beige wax, and it's got the serverless guru logo on the back. And we found a manufacturer where the cost of backpack is still going to be like relatively high. But that's the one thing about serverless guru is that we spend money on stuff that we believe is going to lead to good things in the future. And oftentimes, nobody would ever spend that type of money on something like a backpack for the cost that it is. However, I'll tell you what, when we walk into an event and there's like six serverless guru people all wearing a wax backpack, and it's like completely different than everybody else as well. And also, these are really quality bags. Like, if they were sell retail, it'd probably be like, $100, $200 or something. But you're able to find a manufacturer where we can get that down to like 30 based on volume of order, $35 per backpack. So yeah, more information to come there. But I think this is going to be a really cool one. If we can't make it happen in 2024, it's for sure going to happen in 2025. But I think we can make it happen in 2024. So hoodies, yeah, we need hoodies too. That's a good point. Yeah, the hoodies are great. Okay, there we go. So Tyler from our operations team at Serverless Guru has informed us that we do have the wax backpacks coming. They don't have the logo on it, but we're going to check the quality and see what it feels like, and then based on that, then we can see. I wonder if I can even find a wax backpack example. Maybe like a wax backpack. Let me see. Let me see if I can even find something that looks remotely. Yeah, so I mean, it doesn't look exactly like this, but I will share this. Okay, so I mean, it's in my opinion, the backpacks that we're looking at are way cooler than this backpack. It doesn't come with the dog or the view, of course. I know, unfortunately, but it's this sort of style of like a simplified beige wax sort of. This gives you a general idea of what we're kind of looking at or thinking about. And the idea behind it is, it gets better with age. That's how like the beauty of like wax-based products. This material, it starts off super clean, but then as you actually use it, it starts to break in a little bit. And it's unique to you at some point because the way that it gets broken in is different based on everybody's usage of it. I'm reading what Vincenzo. If you're not on the YouTube chat, you should be in the YouTube chat because I just read what Vincenzo and Jonathan are talking about. It's like hilarious. Okay. All right. So continuing going down the list here, what other stuff is going on? Is the rise of Google AI in the AI space? Well, I think in my opinion, Google has always sort of led the charge on the AI front. And I got to see this firsthand when the product that we were working on that had a machine learning computer inference component to it, Google just completely came in and just like ate our lunch, with how good they were at what they were doing. Um, but yeah, so I would say that they definitely have a strong foothold, and they have for the past half decade. So I would say they'll keep having that moving into the future. Um, and yeah, I think that there's a scenario where it's totally fine. Like when we think about multi-cloud, I know there's been stories recently like Cloudflare. There's a Cloudflare story that just happened I saw on Twitter where uh, Cloudflare came after the company and was asking them to pay back like $100,000 or something of usage, and their monthly usage was like $100 a month or something. And I guess they got flooded with requests. It scaled up all their backend resources on Cloudflare, and then they got this huge bill. And we've obviously seen that. We saw it happen with AWS as well, where S3 was getting hit with tons of requests, and even if that request is not valid, the person that owns the S3 bucket actually then has to take the cost on. And so that's another scenario. We've also seen a deplatforming of companies on both AWS. I'm sure Google as well. We actually saw Google try to take down a company that it was worth like tens of billions of dollars. They deleted like every single backup that they had on accident, which is hilarious. Like, how do you delete the how do you delete multiple regions worth of like a single company's like infrastructure? Like I don't even know how you. Well, I don't. If they have automation in the background that has the company name and it's just like XYZ company, and then Google was like thinking, oh, let's have like really high levels of automation. And it's just like, oh, we just have to click that button, and then they click the button and it starts deleting every single thing across all these different regions. At least make it like three buttons, where it's like this region is separate from this other region, which is separate from this other region. And if you press the button three times, then it deletes the company. Not just one button to delete all of it. So why is that relevant? I think it's because the multi-cloud previously I felt like was a selling point of companies that are working with more traditional based deployments. So think like virtual machines, containers, and as serverless started emerging and the idea of fully managed services where you're just using what the cloud provider already has and you move your focus to your actual core product and not to running like a container or virtual machine orchestration company, that's where I felt like this opinion came in of having to have like multi-cloud setups, and I felt like it was just sort of like the vendor lock-in of using these serverless fully managed services. I felt like that whole thing kind of was stemming from uh, maybe not the best actors for the actual end users, and was more coming from the companies that already exist inside the space, conspiracy hat on, that exist inside the space that were trying to um, kind of scare people away from that direction. And it was very effective actually. And so multi-cloud in terms of vendor lock-in, I kind of understand it. Multi-cloud in terms of the cloud provider deleting your infrastructure. It's like who would possibly, have, obviously that company was aware of that and they did end up surviving that sort of thing, but Google was able to bring it all back up. It's just kind of funny. It's like, think about, there's a deplatforming side, there's a lock-in of the service, and now there's like a cloud provider deleting your infrastructure, and it gets kind of interesting really quick. But what I would say is that if I was building something, I would still choose AWS. If I was writing, let's say um, more of this fully managed service deployment, so like we think about Lambda, API Gateway, AppSync, etc., where I want to wire all these services together, and I don't want to own the building of it, or all of the other provisioning, patching, and actually, like let's say in a virtual machine scenario, having to SSH into it or having to use some other operational tool to then automate that, and then have to have a technical operations team managing and then watching it and scaling it up and down. And even if I have auto scaling in place, there's some other aspect of it that I have to now like manage. So instead, I'm going to use serverless. I'm going to be on AWS. I'm going to have all of my infrastructure as code automated. But then if I need some super advanced AI service only Google has, then I'm going to use that. Or if I need something that's for authentication and I don't trust Cognito, the service from AWS natively, for that, just based on, pick your reason, then I'm going to use OAuth, let's say. And I think that that's totally fine. I think it's totally fine. I don't see the vendor lock-in side as a huge deal, but if you really were worried about it, Lambda for AWS now supports Docker and has for a bit, so you can actually build that Docker image, have your stuff ready to go on it, and you can load it into AWS Lambda, and then that gives you a cleaner off ramp in the future as well. So I think that was something that was missing from Lambda for a long time, but now they've added it in. I feel like it really helps with the argument around um, vendor lock-in, sort of. But obviously, it's like with anything. When you choose a path and you go down that path and you commit to it, all of your knowledge as well gets built up around that set of services. So I think if I was making a decision based on where I would go if I was a large company, I would just look at the track record of the cloud, right? How often has AWS deprecated a service that was being used by tons of customers, right? And it's super, super rare. How often has down events happened where it wasn't back up within a short period of time, right? Obviously, we've all seen US East 1 go down for AWS, but there's been huge cloud outages with the other cloud providers as well. So I think you just have to look at the whole thing and get an understanding of that. And then there's another side, which is usually outside of the control of the developers, which is some executive at the company has a backdoor deal with the cloud provider, and they're sort of forcing that to happen because they get some huge rebate for usage. And the problem with that a lot of times is that it's sort of that in the box thinking, which we talked about earlier, versus sort of out of the box thinking, right? So you save 15%, which is a gigantic number, but also you lock yourself into a 2+ year contract where you can't move or be agile. And then potentially in the next 2 years, the damage of not keeping up with your competitors and not being able to innovate is going to cost you 10 times or 20 times the cost of whatever that rebate was. So sometimes, contractual lock-in is also a really not as much spoken about thing. Probably when we all talk about it. Oh, there you go. They deprecated OpsWorks. I heard OpsWorks was a thing, and then I guess it's not a thing anymore. So um, I don't know. RIP for the people that are using OpsWorks inside of AWS. If you're interested in OAuth, there's a webinar here with Amir and Devarshi. So two serverless guru people. And if you're inside the YouTube comments, you can find it. But if you just look up probably OAuth webinar, Almir, Devarshi, you'll be able to find it on YouTube too. And we've had multiple webinars specifically on the authentication topic, and you can go really deep into it. So if you're sort of on the fence about what do I use, definitely check that out. And a waterproof roll down bag. Oh, you sent me a photo of it. Okay. Oh, there it is. Look at that. That's a good looking backpack. And we're thinking about doing it in all tan. And I feel like it's an adventure bag, you know? It's like it just feels like I love it. I just absolutely love this backpack. So we're not a clothing company or a swag company or whatever else, but it's fun. It's fun. It gets you excited about it. It gets me excited about it, at least. Yeah, we're trying this out. TBD. Hopefully everybody sees it. But with that, we're at the end of the time here. Hopefully, I know this was a little bit more ranty, less straightforward, and we kind of went in a bunch of different directions. But with that, I hope you all have a great rest of your Friday, May 31st. We're on the final, I think it's the final day of the month. Yeah. Yeah, it's the final day of the month. So anything that you need to do to make May the month, if you said you were going to go to the gym, today's the day to go to the gym, right? End it on a high note. If you said that you were going to, I don't know, fill in the gap. My brain. I've been talking so much, I haven't drank my coffee, and that's why I'm struggling here. But I hope you all have a great Friday, a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. And thanks again. And that's it. All right. Bye, everybody. Cheers.